hunter-gatherer times, there was no such thing as wealth. You just had what you could carry. There was no stored wealth. So wealth games didn't really exist. Wealth creation games. All that existed was status games. If you were high status, then you got what little was available first. But even back then, you had to earn your status by taking care of the tribe. Now we have wealth creation, where you can actually create a product or a service. You can scale that product or service, and you can provide abundance for a lot of people. And that's not zero sum. That's a positive sum game. I can be wealthy. You can be wealthy. We can create things together. And clearly, since we are all collectively far, far wealthier than we were in hunter-gatherer times, wealth creation is positive. But status is limited. There's limited status to go around. It's a ranking ladder. It's a hierarchy. And so to rise in status, somebody else has to lower in status. Now, you can have multiple kinds of status, so you can expand some kinds of status, but it's not like wealth creation where it can go infinitely, where we can all be, living in the stars with moon bases or Mars colonies or what have you. So just realize the status games are inherently limited. They're always combative. They always require direct combat, whereas wealth creation games can be just you're creating products. You don't have to fight anybody else. Yes, in the marketplace, your product has to succeed, but that's not quite the same as invective against other people or being angry with other people or feeling pushed down or pushed up or having a beef with somebody. So I would argue that wealth creation games are both more pleasant. They're positive sum, and they actually have concrete material returns. If you have more money, you can buy more things.
Show me where you can exchange your status at the bank.
Exactly. Yeah, it's vague and it's fuzzy. Now, you see people get rich. They have money. What do they want? They want status. So they go to Hollywood, start starring in movies. They donate to nonprofits. They go to Cannes or Davos or what have you. And they start trying to trade the money for status. So, people always want what they don't have. And we are evolutionarily hardwired for status because, as I said, wealth creation didn't really exist until the agricultural revolution, when you could store grain, and then the industrial revolution took it to another level, and now the information age is taking it to yet another level. But there's never been an easier time to make money. Yes, it's still hard, but there's never been an easier time to create wealth because there's so much leverage out there. There's so much opportunity. You still have to go find it. It's not easy. It's not going to fall on your lap, and you have to learn something and know something and do something interesting. But nevertheless, it's possible to many more people. A few hundred years ago, you were born a serf, you were going to die a serf. There was almost no way out of that. That's changed. And so I would argue that you're better off focusing on wealth games and status games. If you're trying to build up, for example, your following on a social network and get famous and then get rich off of being famous, that's a much harder path than getting rich first. And then go for your fame afterwards would be my advice.
Well, a lot of people do that, as you said. It's funny how people who have achieved such a level of wealth, you don't think, why do you need the status? Given that most people use status to then try and cash in to achieve wealth. If you've achieved fuck you money already, if you're post money or asset heavy, as it's known, why are you trying to go in the other direction? Well, as you said, because we've got an illustrious history biologically of wanting status, and wealth is kind of novel.
It's new. Wealth is something that you have to understand more intellectually. Yeah, there's a physical component, more food, more survival. But to truly understand the effects and the powers and the abilities and the limitations and the advantages and disadvantages of wealth, you have to use your neocortex a lot more.
Does that mean
it's not limbic?
The reason to play the game is to win the game and be done with it is harder to win and be done with for status than it is for wealth?
That's a good observation. I hadn't thought that through, but you're right. Yeah, I think that's right. I think people will always want more status, but I think you can be satisfied at a certain level of wealth.
Well, you always have this sort of sense. And this is what leaderboards are, right? This is the iTunes Billboard chart.
That's right.
And it is zero sum.
Right.
And it is, I guess, the Forbes richest people on the planet.
Yeah, that one's harder to climb the ladder on. But the fact that, for example, iTunes and YouTube can put you in competition against your contemporaries every single day and make you go up and down and show you likes and comments and ratings.
This is how much you fell. This is how much you're up. Yeah.
Exactly. They keep you running on that treadmill forever.
Jimmy Carr has this cool idea where he says trajectory is more important than position. So if you are number 101 in the world, but last year you were number 200, versus you're number 2 in the world, but last year you were number 1, there is this sense of the deceleration is very, very tangible. And it's why,
again, it goes back to evolution. Something that is bleeding eventually dies unless you stop the bleeding. So you're hardwired not to lose what you have. And because we evolved in conditions where we're so close to just not surviving, you don't want to give anything up. It's hardwired into us to not give anything up.
So you grip tightly.
That's right.
If you struggle to stay asleep because your body gets too hot or too cold, this is going to help. Just add an 8 Sleep Pod 4 Ultra to your mattress like a fitted sheet, and it will automatically cool down or warm up each side of your bed up to 20 degrees. It's got integrated sensors that track your sleep time, your sleep phases, your HRV, your snoring, and your heart rate with 99% accuracy. And it even starts cooling or heating your bed an hour before you get into it. That is why 8 Sleep has been clinically proven to increase total sleep up to 1 hour every night. Best of all, they've got a 30-day sleep trial, so you can buy it and sleep on it for 29 nights, and if you don't like it, they will give you your money back. Plus, they ship internationally. Right now, you can get $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra by going to the link in the description below or heading to 8sleep.com/modernwisdom and using the code modernwisdom at checkout. That's EIGHT sleep.com/modernwisdom and modernwisdom at checkout. The worst outcome in the world is not having self-esteem. Why?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Well, I look at the people, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I look at the people who don't like themselves, and that's the toughest slot because they're always wrestling with themselves, and it's hard enough to face the outside world, and no one's going to like you more than you like yourself. So if you're struggling with yourself, then the outside world becomes an insurmountable challenge. And it's hard to say why people have low self-esteem. It might be genetic. It might just be circumstantial. A lot of times I think it's because they just weren't unconditionally loved as a child. And that sort of seeps in at a deep core level. But self-esteem issues can be the most limiting. One interesting thought is that, to some extent, self-esteem is a reputation you have with yourself. You're watching yourself at all times. You know what you're doing, and you have your own moral code. Everyone has a different moral code. But if you don't live up to your own moral code, the same code that you hold others to, it will damage your self-esteem. So perhaps one way to build up your self-esteem is to live up to your own code very rigorously, have one, and then live up to it. Another way to raise your self-esteem might be to do things for others. If I look back on my life and, what are the moments that I'm actually proud of? There's very far and few between. And it's not that often. And it's not the things you would expect. It's not the material success. It's not having learned this thing or that. It's when I made a sacrifice for somebody or something that I loved. And that's when I'm actually, ironically, most proud. Now, that's through an explicit mental exercise, but I'll bet you at some level I'm recording that implicitly. So that tells me that even if I am not being loved, then the way to create love is to give love, to express love through sacrifice and through duty. And so I think doing things like that can build up your self-esteem really fast.
It's interesting when you talk about sacrifice, because a lot of the time people say, well, I sacrificed so much for my job. It's like, yeah, but that was you sacrificing something that you wanted less for something that you wanted more, as opposed to genuinely taking some sort of cost. And I wonder whether if self-esteem is you adhering to your internal, your actions and your values aligning, even when it's difficult, or perhaps even more so when it's difficult. I wonder whether there is a price that people who are more introspective, high integrity, pay, because you think, well, you've got this heavier set of overheads that you need to pay in some way.
Well, if being ethical were profitable, everybody would do it, right? So at some level, it does involve a sacrifice. But that sacrifice can also be thought of as you're thinking for the long term rather than the short term. For example, the virtues are the set of virtues is a set of beliefs that if everybody in society followed them as individuals, it would lead to win-win outcomes for everybody. So if I am honest and you are honest, then we can do business more easily. We can interact more easily because we can trust each other. So even though there might be a few liars in the system, as long as there aren't too many liars and too many cheaters, a high-trust society where everybody's honest is better off. And I think a lot of the virtues work this way, right? If I don't go around sleeping with your wife and you don't sleep with mine, and if I don't take all the food that's at the table first and so on, then we all get along better and we can play win-win games. In game theory, the most famous game is Prisoner's Dilemma, but that's all about everybody cheating and the Nash equilibrium. The stable equilibrium there is everybody cheats. And the only way you can play a win-win game is if you have long-term iterated moves. But that's not actually the most common game played in society. The most common game played is one called a stag's hunt, where if we cooperate, we can bring down a big stag and both have big dinners. But if we don't cooperate, then we have to go hunt like rabbits and we each have small dinners. So most of, and that game has two stable equilibriums. And one could be where we're both hunting the rabbit, and one could be where we're hunting the stag. So the high trust society is a more virtuous society where I can trust you to come hunt the stag with me and show up on time and do the work and divide it up properly. So you want to live in a system where everybody has their own set of virtues and follows them, and then we all win. But I would argue you don't need to do that for sacrifice. You don't need to do that for other people. You can do it just purely for yourself. You will have higher self-esteem. You will attract other high virtue people.
Would I go on a stag hunt with me?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And if you're the kind of person who long-term signals ethics and virtues, then you'll attract other people who are ethical and virtuous. Whereas if you are a shark, you will eventually find yourself swimming entirely amongst sharks, and that's an unpleasant existence. But again, this goes back to the equivalent of the marshmallow test. And by the way, the marshmallow test does not replicate.
I saw it got replication crisis hard recently.
But it is about trading off the short term for the long term. And so I think for a lot of these so-called virtues, there are long-term selfish reasons to be virtuous.
Yeah. Did you deal with self-doubt in the past? Is that something that was a hurdle for you to overcome?
Yes and no. I think I dealt with self-doubt in the sense that, I don't know what I'm doing and I need to figure it out. But I didn't doubt myself in the way of somebody else knows better than me for me, or that, I'm an idiot or I'm not worthwhile or anything that I guess I had the benefit of, I grew up with a lot of love. Like the people around me love me unconditionally. And so that just gave me a lot of confidence, not the kind of confidence that would say I have the answer, but the kind of confidence that I will figure it out and I know what I want, or only I am a good arbiter of what I want.
Yeah, that level of self-belief, I suppose, allows you to determine what is it that matters to me. My self-esteem, should I chase this thing or not? I can make a fair judgment on that as opposed to being so swayed. But it's such a good point about even if you think you're not consciously logging the stuff that you're doing, there is some that's in the back of your mind. Was it the daemon? Is that what the ancient Greeks or something used to talk about?
Also in computer science, like there's a concept of a daemon, which is a program that's always running in the background. You can't see it.
Okay.
But yeah, it probably comes from the ancient Greek daemon. But yeah, what you know that you don't even know is far greater than what you know, right? You can't even articulate most of the things you know. There are feelings you have that have no words for them. There are thoughts you have that are felt within the body or subconsciously that you never articulate to yourself. You can't articulate the rules of grammar, yet you exercise them effortlessly when you speak. So I would argue that your implicit knowledge and your knowledge that is unknown to yourself is far greater than the knowledge you can articulate and that you can communicate. And so at some level, you're always watching yourself. That's what your consciousness is, right? It's the thing that's watching everything, including your mind, including your body. So if you want to have high self-esteem, then earn your own self-respect.
I had this idea, the internal golden rule. So the golden rule says, treat others the way that you should be treated, you want to be treated. The internal golden rule says, treat yourself like others should have treated you. And it was a riposte to maybe people that didn't grow up with unconditional love in that way.
On the love thing, one of the interesting things about love is you can try to remember the feeling of being loved. So go back to when someone was in love with you or someone did love you, and like really remember that feeling, like really sit with it and try to recreate it within yourself. And then go to the feeling of you loving someone and when you were in love. And I'm not even talking about romantic love necessarily, so be a little careful there. I'm talking more about like love for...
It can sometimes get complex if you're talking about past romantic love.
Right, a sibling or a child or something like that, or a parent. And think about when you felt love towards someone or something. And now, which is better? And I would argue that the feeling of being in love is actually more exhilarating than the feeling of being loved. Being loved is a little cloying. It's a little too sweet. You kind of want to push the person away. It's a little embarrassing. And you know that if that person is too much into it, that you feel constrained. On the other hand, the feeling of being in love is very expansive. It's very open. It actually makes you a better version of yourself. It makes you want to be a better person. And so you can create love anytime you want. It's just that craving to receive it. That's the problem.
The most expensive trait is pride. How come?
Oh, that was a recent one. I tweeted that just because I think that pride is the enemy of learning. So when I look at my friends and colleagues, the ones who are still stuck